Mr. Chairman, council members, good afternoon. My name is Austin Yost, and I'm from the law firm Coppersmith Brockelman. I'm here today representing the Arizona for Abortion Access Committee, which is the committee sponsoring this initiative measure. I'm joined by Marilyn Rodriguez. She's here for Arizona for Abortion Access as its lobbyist and can appear if necessary. I want to start by thanking the Legislative Council staff for their hard work preparing these draft summaries in this very busy year. And I want to thank the council members for coming in today out of session to perform this important statutory duty for Arizona's voters. Overall, we think that the Legislative Council staff did an excellent job preparing this summary. I'm here to propose only one edit. That proposed edit is on line 2. The draft uses the phrase unborn human being when it describes current Arizona law regulating abortion. We ask that you change that phrase to the word fetus. This amendment would make the summary neutral and objective and medically accurate, and it would be consistent throughout because you'll see in line 13, the summary later uses the phrase the fetus. And so we think that this proposed amendment would fulfill the council's statutory duty to provide an impartial analysis. There's been a lot of discussion today about the legal standard. There's just one point that I wanted to emphasize before I explain further the basis for our request that you make this edit. The section 19124C, of course, requires the council to provide an impartial analysis, and the Arizona Supreme Court held in a case called Tobin versus Rea in 2013 that an analysis must be free from, quote, any misleading tendency, whether of amplification, of omission, or of fallacy, and it must not be tinged with partisan coloring. And critically here, the court said in the same case that even accurate statements can be misleading, argumentative, tinged with partisan coloring, or otherwise lack the impartiality that the statute requires. So applying these principles here, we ask that you change the phrase unborn human being in line 2 to the word fetus. In the reproductive rights context, the phrase unborn human being is tinged with partisan coloring. It is frequently used by anti-abortion activists, and it's rooted in anti-abortion advocacy. I have some examples that I can cover, but understanding my time limits, I'll move on from that for a second here. I've already noted that the summary is also inconsistent in that it uses unborn human being in line 2 and then fetus in line 13, and so this could potentially confuse voters.
Okay, so I just have a question on that. I mean, I think you would grant that for many of us, we do in fact feel it is an unborn human being in terms of policy, but I just wanted to put that in. So I think just looking at this, and to me it seems that it's sort of, I was going to use a rather unfortunate example, but I'm not going to. But it's sort of balancing the two, right? The phrase is here in line 2, and then it's your preferred phrase further in the document. So it's kind of using it both ways, because for us it's not just a fetus. For those of us that believe in at least a potential human being, if not an actual human being. So I guess I'd like to get your perspective on that. Do you not feel that that's, I might as well say it, I was going to say splitting the baby, right? Reference to Solomon, not to this, good Lord. But would you not think that that's a fair look at this, considering it's using, the description is using both phrases?
Mr. Chairman, so the statute sets impartiality as the North Star here, and the Supreme Court has held that phrases, even if they're accurate, and I'm conceding that the current Arizona statute uses the phrase unborn human being, but the council's duty here is to provide an impartial analysis, and there's no similar obligation to use impartial terms in statutes. And so our position is that this phrase is tinged with partisan coloring, and
right,
a more correct...
Mr. Yost, what I'm suggesting, and I don't mean to interrupt, but what I'm suggesting is that there is no way to avoid it, because using the word fetus is partial as well for those of us on the pro-life side. And so that's my point, and I don't know if I'm making myself very clear. So if we were to use the word fetus, to me that's partial, versus to the other side, it's partial the other way, right? So the fact that the description actually uses both phrases in different sections, to me seems very fair and balanced. And why would that not be so?
Mr. Chairman, I dispute the premise underlying the question. I don't think using the word fetus is partial at all. I think that that is an objective and neutral term, and it's also the medically accurate term. And you can look, for example, at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, and the Mayo Clinic on their websites all describe pregnancy as the period in which a fetus develops. And so our position is that this is a neutral and objective term that's not tinged with partisan coloring. And so when you have two options before you, one is a term that's rooted in anti-abortion advocacy, and one that is neutral and objective and medically accurate, that the statute requiring the council to provide an impartial analysis compels you to choose the objective and neutral term rather than the phrase tinged in partisan coloring. So I'm disputing the premise underlying the question. I don't think fetus is a partial term.
I understand. I guess just for my personal curiosity, would you disagree that the fetus, as you put it, is not an unborn human being, or at least potentially not an unborn human being?
Mr. Chairman, what I'm saying is the statute requires the council to provide an impartial analysis. And using a phrase that's tinged with partisan coloring violates that impartiality requirement. There's a place for people to submit pro and con arguments advocating for or against the measure in the publicity pamphlet, but that's not this council's responsibility under the statute. It's to provide an impartial analysis. And so using the objective and neutral term satisfies the council's obligation, whereas using a term that's used in anti-abortion advocacy efforts does not. That's our position.
Understood. That's your position. Understood. Thank you. Yes, Mr. Graham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question, Arizona has a personhood provision. Arizona Supreme Court upheld a Planned Parenthood case. Are you familiar with that?
I am.
So what's your thought there? I mean, we have Arizona revised statute that says current law has to be interpreted to acknowledge rights that belong to unborn children. So using fetus, is that really only a partisan term? Is it wrong under current law as interpreted by the Supreme Court? I mean, I'd be a little concerned what you're asking for here actually violates state law.
Mr. Chairman, representing Grantham, I'm again returning to the council's statutory obligation to provide an impartial analysis here. It's true that the statute, current Arizona statute, uses the phrase unborn human being in it. And so if the Supreme Court is quoting that statute or recognizing that that's what it says, I'm not disputing that that's what it says, but that's different than the obligation here, which is to provide an impartial analysis of the law, and using them inconsistently is a problem. But the more fundamental problem is that the phrase unborn human being is rooted in anti-abortion advocacy, and so it's putting a thumb on the scales in a way that the statute forbids.
So, okay, I understand where you're coming from. I would say that the word abortion is obviously laced with politics, right? I mean, you just say the word at the table, and I'm speaking. Yeah. Thanks. So, I'm just curious. We've picked this word. We were in a similar discussion earlier on a different proposition with the term alien, right? And the definition of alien in law, and just out of the Oxford Dictionary, what it means. It's in federal statute. This is the language of the law. So I almost feel like asking us to not honor the language of the law is more partisan than sticking with what's actually law. I understand your position. I know where you are on this. I don't think it's right to go against precedent and our own state law when putting these things to language and onto paper. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Representative Stahl-Hamilton.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just 2 points, or to those points. Mr. Grantham, actually, abortion is a medically accurate term. It's not partisan or bipartisan. If someone has a miscarriage, when you look at their doctor's chart,
So how come alien doesn't get that same respect?
when you
Well,
look
sure,
at
once I can-
a person's medical chart, The technical medical language says spontaneous abortion. That is the terminology when a person miscarries. So abortion is not a word that is used to be inflammatory. It's actually medical language. So it's unfortunate that perhaps it's been politicized, but it's actually accurate information. And then secondly, I'm just curious, Mr. Toma, I was listening to you, and you describe yourself as pro-life, and that for you it's very important to have the word unborn person. But would you also agree that it's critically important to you that it could be just as important to protect a developing fetus?
I'm sorry, say the last part again. Would it be important to what?
As important to protect a developing fetus.
As it is to protect an unborn human.
Correct.
Well, I'm not entirely sure what the difference would be in that situation, other than which is why we're using both words. And we're using both phrases in this particular case, which again makes my point, which is that this is fair and balanced.
Mr. Speaker, you can support the medically accurate term. Yes?
I'm not a doctor, Representative Stahl Hamilton. I don't care what the medical accurate term is. What I care about in this particular case is, I mean, this gentleman is making the point that one of these terms, in his opinion, is charged, if you will, politically, and the other one would be more technically accurate. And I was making the point that both of them are charged, depending on which side of this you're on. So I stand by that point. I don't think that's any different. I mean, the term abortion, to your point, I think, is charged, just overall. And when you're talking about a miscarriage, yeah, I understand technically that is a spontaneous abortion, as you put it, but people don't, the average person doesn't refer to it that way. They refer to it as a miscarriage. And we commonly refer to it as that because there's a distinction and the words actually matter. And if you would have said, I had an abortion versus I had a miscarriage, those mean two different things to the average person when you're talking to them. And so what we're talking about is trying to be clear about what this bill does, I'm sorry, what this initiative does. And as such, I think, again, that goes back to the point. But I think Mr.
I just have a follow-up question for him, and then I'll be done.
Okay.
You can take up to that.
I would say, due to that point, Representative Martinez.
No, go ahead, Travis.
My last question, would using the term fetus violate state law as it exists today?
Mr. Chairman, Representative
The
Grantham.
law school test.
No, in fact, I think using the word fetus is fully compliant with, and in fact, I think it's this council's duty under the statute in providing an impartial analysis to use the word fetus.
Representative Martinez.
It's all right.
Okay. Members, any further questions for Mr. Yost? Senator Borelli.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Speaker. Sir, an unborn horse, is that a fetus or is it an unborn horse?
Are we really comparing, Mr. Chair, are we really comparing animals now to human beings?
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chair, point of order,
Mr.
the
Chair?
mammals
Okay.
are also fetuses.
Oh, my.
My point, yes, Mr.
Okay.
Sir, you don't have to answer.
All right.
I'll just go ahead and answer
Please,
this.
through the chair, let's compose ourselves. Thank you.
Yes, my point, it's a horse. If the calf is not born, it's still a calf. We're talking about a human being. That's in statute, as defined as a human being. Still a human being.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Borelli, I think that this discussion only underscores that this phrase is tinged with partisan coloring, and that's why the statute requires an neutral, impartial term that's the medically accurate term, fetus, rather than phrases that are by definition partial and rooted in anti-abortion advocacy.
Mr.
Our
Speaker.
positions that the statute requires.
Representative Martinez.
Sir, I am also of the opinion, because it's my opinion and I am the legislator, that fetus is a insult to an unborn baby, and you're trying to color it as such. So as though you have your opinion, we have ours. Thank you for sharing your opinion. My opinion is that it's an unborn baby. It's an unborn child, and not just a fetus. A fetus can be a mammal. So you have your language, and I have mine.
Thank you.
And
Members,
I am the one with the vote.
any further questions for Mr. Yost? We do have another individual wanting to testify. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Leslie Shepard? Okay. You have 2 minutes. Please proceed.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, Senators, I'm very grateful that it was pointed out that on line 13 that he wanted to be changed to not say unborn human. And my challenge is actually the part where it says fetus, that it actually say unborn human. Everybody sitting up behind that desk right now that's going to make a vote, you were an unborn human inside of your mother's womb. Some of us have had miscarriages. That shouldn't mean that we're okay with letting people murder a child. I say that just because when I'm sitting here hearing this legislative stuff, I've been an independent for over 40 years. I'm actually going to be going to party non-defined right after the primary. I'm hoping you do pass the one, Mr. Grantham. I'm hoping that you guys do pass the one that allows people who are not affiliated with the party to have a right to vote in the primary. Because up to this point, the parties have dominated, and we, the people who are undefined, are not considered. We're all humans. Fetus is a cycle of life, so fetus is not an appropriate word to label any one of us that is in this room. And so I'm going to ask that you guys please change the wording where it says fetus, because that can represent an animal. And not one of you up there are animals.
We all are.
Well, you can call yourself whatever, but you're the kind that actually has the ability to vote to murder somebody, and monkeys and animals don't. They don't do that to their unborn. Only humans do that. And so I'm just asking that you change the wording, that it would actually acknowledge that these are human beings, that we're choosing to allow people. And the word abortion, when she said the word spontaneous abortion, that's to a dead human. That's called a DNC. Whatever they medically want to call it is irrelevant to me. When my baby died inside of my body, there was only one way to remove the baby. It wasn't because I chose to murder the baby. So it's important that we identify that we're talking about human beings. We are not talking about abstract cells that are growing in our body, because every single one of us, we're those cells that God designed. And he says that people who shed innocent blood, they will be cursed. That means our land and your choices that you make will be the difference between our land being cursed or it being healed. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shepard. Any questions?
I apologize.
for-
Does anyone have a question?
Mr. Speaker, just a point of clarification. If you're not registered with the party, you actually can vote in the primaries. So
Well,
just a
up
point
to-
of clarification.
All through my life, I only got to show up through the general. I understand that it's shifting now, but I'm just talking about the majority of my life. I wasn't allowed to vote during a primary. I was only allowed to vote for a general.
You are now, though.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Actually, we do have a question for you.
Well, yes, Mr.
Okay,
Speaker.
so just members, we're not talking about elections at the moment. Let's just, we're happy to connect with Ms. Shepard afterwards, and we can help her out. But
Yes, sir.
let's stick to the subject. if you
Yes,
will,
sir.
please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chair. May I just...
Do I sit down?
No, just for
Okay.
clarification for your education knowledge, the word fetus was put into this initiative that was gathered signatures for. That's their language that was going on the ballot, so isn't it? We can't change that.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that's not a real representation, because not one woman will have an animal inside of her. If they want to call an animal, they have a future human being inside of them. They don't have a future cow or a dog or a cat. Anything else?
I concur. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Members, any further discussion, I believe that's it in terms of individuals that want to speak from the public. Any other discussion from the dais?
I have an amendment.
Please proceed.
All right, thank you. Mr. Speaker, I propose that we, on page 1, line 2, strike unborn human being and insert the word fetus.
Okay. Any further discussion?
It's a good idea.
Okay. Seeing none, those in favor of the proposed amendment, vote aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, vote nay.
No.
Appears the nays have it. All right. Any further amendments? Okay. Seeing none, Mr. President.
Speaker, I move the adoption of the draft analysis for I-05-2024 prepared by the staff of the Legislative Council.
Please call the roll.
Aye. Oh, I'm sorry, I've changed that to no.
Mr. Chair, may I explain my vote, please?
Please.
Thank you. When we're talking about language, it is important, and scientific language is the least biased language. When we look at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, they describe pregnancy as a period up to 41 weeks in which a fetus develops inside a woman's womb. The American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology also uses fetus. The Mayo Clinic also uses fetus. A fetus is the correct medical term. So I just want to be very clear that that's the language, scientific language is the most appropriate to use. And to an earlier point, a fetus doesn't get a vote because they're not yet a human being. I have a vote because I'm of age, a citizen, and a human being. So I don't know why we went down that rabbit hole, but it's important that we don't. And the use of medical terms and scientific terms will allow us to stay right where we are, look at this for what it is, and move forward. So I'm a no.
Representative Martinez? Aye. Representative Glenn?
Aye.
Representative Scott Hamilton?
Nay.
Senator Boyd?
Aye.
Senator Borelli?
Pass.
Senator Epstein?
Nay.
Senator Fernandez?
No.
Senator Craig?
Aye.
Senator Mendez?
No.
Senator Borelli?
Mr. Chair, may I explain my vote?
Please.
Thank you. You know, I'm glad the representative brought up language, because in this, it doesn't even define what a woman is. This is a pregnant individual. That individual could be 13 years old. Healthcare professional could be school nurse, school counselor. So if your 14-year-old girl daughter is pregnant and she goes to the counselor, says, I want to get an abortion, and don't worry, we won't tell your parents, because the parents won't have a right to know either. This is very dangerous. It doesn't define healthcare professional. It should be medical professional, which means the parents' rights are even aborted. Unfortunately, we're stuck with what we have here, and I vote aye, it passes language. On the garbage.
Senator Peterson?
Aye.
Representative Clover?
Aye.
8 ayes, 6 nays, and 0 not voting.
All right, by 8 ayes, 6 nays, 0 not voting, you have adopted the proposed draft. All right, Make Elections Fair, Arizona.